How long should a variable name be? Robert Martin, Uncle Bob. Hello, I'm Chris Athanas. I'm a KMP developer. Tech support said they're coming out Tuesday. I really hope they're going to come out Tuesday and close that thing out finally. And we're going to be responding today with how long should a variable name be by Uncle Bob. This is going to be great because there's always a big debate. Like, oh, keep them short, keep them long. I like them to be as descriptive as possible, as short as possible. I have a whole style guide I've made for variable naming because it's such an important concept. It's in one of my courses in my GitHub about the library in Kotlin, which uses Alan Kay's techniques, so you can find it down there. Anyway, let's see what he has to say.
Is int d a good name for elapsed time in days? Now, your original thought would be, well, no, of course not, because d is just a one-letter name. That's awful. But wait a minute. How long should a variable name be?
It depends on the context. How big is the scope? How much of it's being used? Is it just a little loop right there? Is used in one place? You can use one character name. But if it's used in a bigger scope, it's gonna have to be a more specific name. And if it's even larger, it's just like when you start getting these larger scopes, that's when you have to break it out into functions. And when do you do that? Matter of taste, style, experience. There's no right way of doing these things. It's just what makes sense at the time. Thinking about it, being conscious, not having 5 rules or one neat trick. No. You have to work through these things. Trying to make it. It's like writing a book. Like, how do you write a book? Well, you write words. Like, well, which words? Like, isn't that is the question, isn't it? That is the question. Which words? What meaning are you trying to convey? To who? Is it just you, or is this gonna be read by 1,000 people? Is this library code? Is it be read? An API code? Some example code? Who's this for?
What's the rule for the length of a variable name? Now consider the for loop. For I equals 0, I less than 10.
I love DevTools Made Simple. He always adds his source code stuff in here. Yeah, I think he's Java and programmer, Kotlin as well. I see him using sometimes. This is some incomplete Java code. Let's keep going.
And I++. Do you want that I to be something other than I? The answer is probably not. And so there does seem to be a place for single letter variable names, like I. Okay. So what's the rule? What is the rule for the length of a variable name? And here's the rule that I use. A variable name should be proportional to the size of the scope.
Okay, so he does talk about it. So Uncle Bob does understand some of this stuff. All right, let's keep going.
If the scope is very small, like one line, a single letter is fine. You don't want to have anything else. If it's a one-line scope, you don't want to have anything else. A single letter is great. D would be a perfectly valid name for a date if D existed only in a single line. Because you wouldn't lose the context. You wouldn't need the name to remind you of anything.
Right.
The function call that generated the name would be enough.
Okay, he's explaining this well. He's a rare opportunity to listen to what Bob says that actually makes sense, and it can seem somewhat be a little bit of a general way of thinking about a problem. Not the problem itself, not just here's the answer to the problem, how to think about the problem. This is the helpful stuff, Bob.
Long scopes need long names. So let's walk through the hierarchy here. Inside of an if statement, we've got maybe a couple of lines in that if statement. Variables inside that if statement ought to be very short. Variables inside of a really tiny while loop should be very short. If you have a function, and that function is 4 lines long,
the counter, yeah, but maybe the stuff inside the function still needs more words. I don't know. You need to get some, like, where's the whiteboard with examples? He's got a big old projector in there. There should be on a projector the rules and a style guide. Does that exist? No? I have a style guide and I'm a random retard on the internet. I have a style guide. Where's your style guide?
Variables inside that function should probably be pretty short. Because it's 4 lines long, maybe they have to be a little bit longer. Arguments would probably be a little bit longer. A word would probably be good for an argument. Instance variables live inside a class. They have a slightly longer scope. They have the scope of the class. So probably an instance variable should be long-ish, 2 words maybe.
Okay, now you're getting off in the weeds, man.
Functions, the arguments to a member function, probably a word. Global functions. Global functions have a huge scope. They better be very long. Global variables, sorry. Global variables have a huge scope. So they should probably be very long.
Or inside of an object. The class inside of a class, and then, yeah, that's keep them encapsulated inside there, but keep going.
Variables should have a length proportional to the scope that contains them. What's the rule for functions? Exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. The bigger the scope, the smaller the name for a function. And for very obvious reasons. We would not want to call the open function if the name of the open function was open file and throw exception if not found. As the scope of the function gets larger, we want the name to shrink. We want the name to shrink because we're going to call it more.
Okay, I mean, I guess these are. I mean, I guess these are like generalized rules. Okay, yeah, this is. I mean, I guess it's more helpful. It's just a way of thinking about it. I guess that's helpful.
That lives in a large scope will be called from all over.
But these are. Yeah, what's the word for it? It's just a little too pedantic, a little concentrating on things that this is important, but it's not like in the big scheme of things. It's not the most important. The thing is, we're trying to make these things readable and understandable for other people when they first see the stuff, so they don't have to spend all their time and cognitive abilities just to understand what we're doing. We want them to use what we've made, not have to fully understand everything we put in there. I know we want to make, oh, look how clever I am, but it's like that's not helpful.
All over the place, so we want to shrink the name down. Moreover, if the function is in a large scope, it must be abstract. It must be dealing with a high level abstraction, so we want the name to be short. As the scope containing a function decreases, the name starts to get longer. So the instance methods of a class will probably have slightly longer names. Private functions called by public functions will have even longer names. Private.
See, this is the kind of stuff, Uncle Bob, that gets people into like bike shedding, which is like talking about stuff that's not that important, not that critical, and trying to get away from the hard stuff, which is like, how do I convey the most compact meaning to someone else, which I don't know what their what their background is, or how to make it as simple and concise as possible. So either when I come back or somebody else comes back, they can read it. They know what the hell I'm talking about, and not confused or not trying to be clever.
Functions called by private functions will have even longer names. You can continue down that hierarchy for a very long time, especially if you're extracting until you drop. Because you'll extract and extract and extract, and all these extract.
Well, see, that's where I also gone off the rails. Why you extract? Is there a reason for that? We can collapse in the IDE. I know if you haven't been in IDE lately, Bob, we can collapse stuff down. So we can have big fat function calls. If there's no reason to keep these things in separate files, you can just collapse these things down, and we can keep a lot of lower complexity by keeping like instance variables in scope somehow. I've shown you how to do that and explain it in my Fred's road trip storyteller. I show how I'm doing that and why. Because it's real convenient as opposed to having 1,000 windows open to like split windows or just have the code right there and the instant variables right there, so you don't have to like pass blocks of objects back and forth. It's just right there. So it's just another style. So his style is he wants 1,000 different windows open, and my style is I want to collapse down the code so I don't have to see it, which is doing the same thing. Just one is just it has to do a call. The other one's like it's just the code sitting right there. It's like okay.
Functions are going to be private, and every time you go down another level, the name gets longer and longer and longer. And it gets longer because the function becomes more precise. It does something really tiny, really precise that you need words to specify.
Right. Okay.
So the name of a function is inverse.
Or you can just call through the class chains as opposed to having a big long function name. These are just stylistic approaches. These aren't really rules, Bob.
Proportional to the size of the scope it contains.
It's just like I wish you would put it in terms like these are things to think about. But if you did that, people would be like, "Well, we want a rule," and that's what he's been told, right? By on these sales calls, we just want a set of rules that we tell our developers so they can do this stuff. It's like, of course, wouldn't that be nice to have a cargo call? If we had that, it would already exist. After 50 years of computers, if we had something like that, it would already exist. The stuff when we're getting on at this level of art, it's about style, context, taste, art, curation of like what to include, what not to include, what to put at lower level, what to put up high level, what are sensible defaults, all that kind of stuff. It's way harder than the variable names need to be shorter. I mean, it's somewhat a useful concept, but it's more like the names needs to be as short as possible and understandable in the context and lower cognitive load. Like we know if a variable has a single character name, it's probably just a counter or it's inconsequential or it's an index. It's not something to focus in on. So, but if you have something that's named, you're going to be focusing on what that thing is actually named in that context, and you're going to expect it to fit in with the metaphors you've chosen, which is all art, by the way. I know we want it to be technical, like Uncle Bob. We want to be technical. If it's a private class, it could be a smaller name than the one that has a public class. It's like, okay, I don't know how helpful that is. That's really not. Let's thinking about something else. Like, is the names of these things important? Like, yes, the name is important, but the meaning of the name that's being conveyed in the context of the domain that you've designed it in, and it has to fit in with all the other stuff you've done. That's the hard part. Not how long is the damn thing gonna be now? This variable is too long. Uncle Bob said a private. It's gotta be close. It's like all that stuff. It's like there's people arguing about that crap now. That's not helpful. All right, give me a like, subscribe, and I'll keep ranting and go give DevTools Nate Simple like and subscribe.